Now, there's no relief for mortgage holders today, with the Reserve Bank leaving rates on hold again at 4.35%. Of course, most people paying much more than that on their mortgages. University of New South Wales economics professor Gigi Foster now joins me also in Sydney. Good to speak to you again, Gigi. This is exactly the outcome we expected, but there was some language from the Reserve Bank that is encouraging some people to think we could even have an interest rate cut by February. What's your assessment?
Yeah, I do think that that's possible. But honestly, if I were in Michele Bullock's shoes, I think the number one thing I'd be looking for is a bit of partnership rather than politicking across the aisle in the fiscal policy dimension, because every time that we hear the governance of the day, other than the RBA, talking about what can be done in relation to the massive cost of living crisis, the housing affordability crisis, the energy issues, it's always, oh, let the government now propose this new package or this new big spending thing. And I don't think that's really addressing the structural issues of the economy. So I think Michele Bullock is waiting for some signals that the government is going to start actually doing more of the heavy lifting in trying to bring this inflation problem down.
All right, let me show you some of what Michele Bullock had to say today before we take up that point.
When I speak to the Treasurer, I believe him when he tells me that he is absolutely on the same page, because he understands, like I do, and I think like all of you do, that inflation is really what's causing so many troubles for Australian people at the moment.
So, Gigi, she's saying that they're really on the same page, but if I understand your point, she should be talking more stridently, demanding more action from the government in constraining expenditure to make her job easier.
That's what I think, yes. And I think that the reason she's pitching it this way is she doesn't want to be picking a fight. Many people have been picking a fight with her. And, of course, one can lay some of the blame at the feet of the RBA for not starting to raise interest rates earlier, a couple of years ago. But I think now she is struggling, just like the rest of us are, to make sense of some unusual figures in the labor market and in terms of what's happening in the economy, and trying to work out when we really are at the point where the economy can maintain a rates cut and not have inflation continue to go up and basically get baked in. Her fear, of course, is that it's already baked in to an extent. So I think she's trying to be conciliatory, and it's more of an aspirational statement than reality.
If you talk about the fiscal side of this, so we're unlikely to see any constraint. There's an election coming, maybe even a budget before an election. I suspect not, but possibly a budget. So we're expecting to see more spending measures rather than fewer from Labor, aren't we?
It's very unfortunate, yes. And I think they could pitch a different political tack if they wanted to. I mean, I always sit on my hands and sort of wait for the phone to ring, but I would love to be able to give some advice to the politicians in Canberra. You can spin a different way of approaching problems in a positive way that Australians will appreciate. You can recognize the productivity slump, you can recognize the overregulation, and you can do things about that. You can say, look, we're going to roll back some spending in areas where we know there's government waste. We've seen the DOGE initiative coming down the track in the US.
Bring it on.
We think that has something, to it. So how about looking for some ways that the government can, again, shoulder some of the burden in increasing productivity and reducing waste so that we can all have lower inflation and a higher quality of life? I'd love to see that. And that would actually make me more likely to consider, maybe even voting. I don't know if I would vote for that, but, maybe just at least thinking, well, maybe there's some hope from this side of politics.
Yeah, we want to see it. We should see it from both sides of politics, and neither side have really shown it in the last little while, and it's inevitable. The government's going to have to pull back. It's a matter of whether you do it on your own volition in an orderly way rather than wait for a crisis. Thanks for joining us, Gigi. I always love getting your input. Gigi Foster there. Have a great Christmas and New Year.